Have you ever wondered what would happen if a leader tried to change everything about their country, all at once? The religion, the art, the capital city, everything. It sounds pretty much impossible, right? Well, about 3,000 years ago, an Egyptian pharaoh did exactly that. Let's get into the incredible story of Akhenaten, the rebel pharaoh.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the Egypt he was born into to see what he was rebelling against. Then we'll dive into the wild changes he made, check out the new city he built from scratch, see what happened when his plans went wrong, and finally, figure out what's left of his legacy today.
All right, first things first. To really get why Akhenaten's revolution was so mind-blowing, you have to understand the world he grew up in. So, picture ancient Egypt. They worshipped a whole host of gods, many with awesome animal heads. But the top dog, the most powerful of them all, was a god named Amun-Ra. Now his priests, they weren't just religious guys. They were incredibly powerful, controlling a huge chunk of Egypt's land and money. The capital city, Thebes, was basically Amun-Ra's headquarters, and his temples were the engines of the whole economy. This was the system Akhenaten was about to blow up.
Okay, so into this very traditional world steps our pharaoh, and he basically decides to light the entire rulebook on fire. He introduced a single, brand new god, the Aten. And let me tell you, the Aten was unlike anything the Egyptians had ever seen. They were used to gods with human bodies and animal heads. The Aten, it was just a golden disk in the sky, the sun. Its rays of light ended in little hands, reaching down to give life to everything. It was a totally abstract and new way of thinking about a god.
And here's where it gets really radical. Akhenaten said the Aten wasn't just a new god, it was the only god. That's it. For a culture with hundreds of gods, this was just unthinkable. This belief in a single god is called monotheism, and it was a revolutionary idea for the time. And to top it all off, Akhenaten announced that he, and only he, could speak to the Aten. Talk about a power move.
And you can see how personal this all was just by looking at his name. See, he wasn't born Akhenaten. His birth name was Amenhotep IV.
And the name Amenhotep literally means Amun is satisfied. You hear that? Amun, the main god he was trying to overthrow. His own name was a tribute to the old system. So yeah, that had to change.
So he dropped his birth name completely and became Akhenaten.
This new name means effective for the Aten. It was a massive public statement. It was like he was rebranding himself to be the living symbol of his own revolution.
And his revolution didn't just stop with religion. Nope. He completely turned the art world upside down. For centuries, Egyptian art had been very stiff and formal, with super strict rules. But the art under Akhenaten, what we now call the Amarna style, was fluid, natural, and, well, frankly, a little weird.
I mean, this new art style showed people, including the pharaoh himself, with these really long heads, thin necks, and big bellies. But what was really new was the emotion. You suddenly see artwork of Akhenaten and his wife, the famous Queen Nefertiti, just being a family, kissing their daughters, eating dinner. For the first time, a pharaoh wasn't just a god, he was a husband and a father. And Nefertiti was almost always shown as his equal, a true partner in all this.
So if you've got a new god, a new art style, you need a new home for it all, right? Akhenaten needed a totally clean slate, so he decided to build a whole new capital city.
He went out to a remote patch of desert that had never been dedicated to any other god and built a massive city at lightning speed. He called it Akhenaten, which means the horizon of the Aten. He marked out its borders with huge stone tablets, and then he moved the entire government and royal court out to the middle of nowhere. The new temples were even built without roofs, so the rays of the sun, the Aten, could shine right in.
So what were these giant boundary markers? They're called stelae. You can think of them as huge stone billboards. They were carved with inscriptions that basically said, "This land belongs to the Aten forever." They were a very permanent keep out sign for the old gods.
But here's the thing. When you pour all your time, money, and energy into one massive, all-consuming project, other important things can start to fall apart.
The backlash was enormous. Akhenaten wasn't just ignoring the old gods, he was actively attacking them. He forced the great temples of Amun to close. He sent workers with chisels to physically scrape the names of the old gods off of monuments. This put thousands of rich, powerful priests out of a job. And while he was waging this war at home, pleas for help from the edges of his empire were being ignored.
How do we know for sure he was neglecting the empire? Well, archaeologists basically found his mail. Buried in the ruins of his city, they discovered over 300 clay tablets. We call them the Amarna letters, and they're the actual diplomatic messages from foreign kings and governors, all written in a script called cuneiform.
Cuneiform was the international language of the day, kind of like how English is often used for diplomacy now. It's a system of wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay. These letters give us a direct window into the political chaos of the time.
And these letters paint a really desperate picture. You have one governor from a territory in Canaan writing, "If we have no soldiers, my lord, the lands of the king will be lost." It's a desperate plea for help. But it seems Akhenaten was just too busy with his religious revolution to pay attention.
So what happens to a revolution when its leader is gone? Well, in this case, the whole thing just completely collapses.
After about 17 years as pharaoh, Akhenaten dies, and almost immediately the old ways come rushing back. A young boy takes the throne, first called Tutankhaten, but soon he changes his name to Tutankhamun, putting the old god Amun right back in the spotlight. The royal court packs up and abandons Akhenaten's brand new city, and within a few decades, other pharaohs tried to erase his name from history, to pretend he never even existed.
In the end, his revolution was a complete failure. He went from being a visionary king to being called the heretic. And for 3,000 years, he was almost completely forgotten, just a ghost in Egyptian history. That is, until archaeologists in the 1800s stumbled on the ruins of his lost city, and his incredible story came back to light.
So that leaves us with the big question. Who was Akhenaten really? Was he a brilliant visionary with ideas that were thousands of years ahead of their time? Or was he a dangerous ruler, so obsessed with his own vision that he let his empire crumble? The amazing thing is, historians still debate it today. So, what do you think?